Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. It's Dr. Kenya and Dr. Deanne here. Okay.
It's a,
Oh, I was going to say, can we hear you?
we're here, I
So,
think.
so we are tuning in today from North Carolina, and we wanted to have a conversation about rapid research. And so this conversation will include our take on rapid research, some of our experiences, strategies, considerations, that sort of thing. And we're looking for your questions as well. So if anyone has joined us at the top of the hour, please share your name and where you're from, and then we'll jump into your questions in a minute. So, Deanne, you raised this as a topic, and I think that it's a timely one.
Yes.
What made this something that was top of mind for you?
Well, I think Kenya, is something we deal with constantly, but it's really just stepping back, looking at the kind of we're in an agile world. We've been in an agile world,
Mm-hmm.
and it just keeps getting faster, at the
Mm-hmm.
speed of light. And I forgot where I was reading the article, but someone was saying, in terms of that race. And I think a lot of us get, especially if you've been doing it a while, you get very focused on detailed, qualitative, that long haul research and
Mm-hmm.
planning. And sometimes it just doesn't work in an agile environment. And what happens to many of us is we kind of get left behind, in the day to day workings of things being worked on. So it's really, how does UX fit in that agile process? We're
Mm-hmm.
not taking away from traditional research. It's certainly discovery, and wherever possible, that really detailed, those focus groups, those ethnography studies are great. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're working with the sprint team and you're trying to deliver and make decisions, we've got to be leaner. We've got
Yeah.
to operate in that context. So
Yeah.
I think that's what brought it up.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And when we speak in terms of agile, there's the age-old challenge of pure agile versus some hybrid with waterfall and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And honestly, whether you use big A agile or small A agile, I think the most important part in what we're talking about is considering your team in terms of whatever sprint concert or rhythm you have going, and considering your UX research team as a part of that in terms of planning out, executing, delivering insights in the context of a sprint where possible, so that
Exactly.
the team can make their changes or do their thing with the insights coming out of that work. Something else to think of is you just made the comment about those of us that have been doing this for a long time, how we want to get into the mechanics of doing really rich and extensive research.
Hmm.
I would say that it's also those that are early in their career in terms of research,
Yeah.
especially
Yep.
those coming out of academic settings. There's a real kind of perspective or having blinders on and not recognizing that your ability to be lean, to provide actionable results quickly, that is our job.
Yes. Yes, and I like the word lean. I know we're referring to things as rapid research, but for people in development or product teams are familiar with lean methodologies, which fits
Mhm,
very nicely in an agile world, and in an innovative world.
mhm,
That's really what rapid research is. It's us taking a lean approach, going in, figuring out what those key pain points are, figuring out what those requirements are, or validating something that's out there,
mhm,
but doing it quickly so that you can figure out without wasting that the resources and time, or just eliminating that feedback. Yeah,
mhm.
how many times have we seen that happen? Development's got to go. They've got to keep
Yes.
moving. And so the user just will quickly fall out of that equation to meet those project deadlines. So really, it's just looking at some of the methodologies we already use, but implementing them in a leaner
Or
fashion, or
scrappier. Answer my
Scrappier, scrappy. You have to be a
yeah,
little bit scrappy to get in there. So you might not get, you know, 20 users, and focus
right.
groups, done. You may have to grab subject matter experts, whether it be your customer service teams, your
Yeah.
training teams. You can't always either afford or have time for, that recruitment, which you and I talk a lot about.
Doing in our sides. But I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say the biggest kind of elephant in the room or the longest pole in the tent is recruitment and
Yes.
that engagement. And so if you think about, like you mentioned, looking to people within the organization that have somewhat of a user perspective
Yes.
Or context, which is folks in support, QA, but also having some level of constant engagement with your customer and prospects.
Yep.
And having them kind of on speed dial. So when you are going to embark upon some really quick effort to get results, that you can lean on some people to be available for that type of thing, with the caveat that you don't want to always lean on the people who make themselves available all the time, or that you overuse their perspective to represent that of most or all of your customers.
Exactly.
Balance that.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to have expertise on your team when you're looking at doing this.
It absolutely is. And then you can even think of your UX expertise. Think of the number of projects we've gone in on, don't have a lot of time, might be able to turn out a quick usability test of a concept or interview a few people. But there's all this other data you have out there where you don't have to reach out to people. So think about all the metrics. This is what do people do? Even if it's a new product, you may have other data that's free and available. So it's really just being able to pull together and synthesize all that information in a scrappy way. But you're totally right. I mean, it becomes very easy to lean on customers who are always available when you're under the gun. And there are many dangers. Again, we could probably have a whole session on recruitment and target audience and the dangers of that overuse. You end up getting a product for that perspective. But there are a lot in our heuristic review. So you don't have time to do one. Well, if you have a UX specialist, a human factors specialist, there's a lot that can be gained in a few hours of just having them use those heuristics and rate and evaluate the system on how well it's adhering to its principles. So many things you can do. You can even get more interesting, but I'll
that's a good point. And then with the heuristics, I mean, I think about allowing people to back out of errors that they make, providing context on errors, making sure there's visibility of the system status. So there are heuristics that are available.
Yes.
To lean on. And at the core, there are about 10, and then there are more that extend beyond that 10. But you have those heuristics to kind of give you a guideline around the golden rules of what is or what are best practices in software development or product development. You can also think about things in terms of, like you said, that just the process of thinking outside of the box.
Yes.
Like that heuristic. I can recall a time in an organization where there was a struggle between where to place the buttons to take action. And so you print out version A and version B. And if you don't have the bandwidth to do A/B testing in the actual application, or if it's something small enough that you need a quick answer to, then put it on the wall. Take the two printouts of it, version A and version B, put it on the wall and allow people to leave comments on Post-it notes. And then you walk, at the end of the day, you walk back and you see kind of where perspectives land in terms of what people see as the best approach. How does it align to your design system, or what you're defining in your design system? I think that's also important. In noting this kind of scrappy, rapid research, I think it's important to note that from my perspective, about 25% of your time is that whole planning and standing it up. 50% of the time is actually executing if you're engaging people outside of the organization, for example. And then the final 25% is that analysis and discussion with the team. So you go through and deliver and talk about, here are the actionable insights. It's not about producing a report. It's not about making it formal.
It's the insight, right? Exactly. It's the findings, the kind of those objective findings, and then the insights. That's where you spend a lot of time, right? Is that that analysis and synthesis to make those decisions. And there are lots and lots of tools today that make it easier for UX professionals to do. Uh-oh, you disappeared.
Oops. Sorry, I hit something.
It's okay.
I was like, oops, what did I just do?
What happened? I saw too much of me.
And like vice versa. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. But the tools that are coming out, think of the AI that's being incorporated into many of the tools we use. So they're really lending themselves for us to do this kind of rapid research. It used to be we had to go through every second and rewind of, each of a video, and transcribe it. Well, now the tools will do that for us and even find trends in there. So, we need to leverage those things so we can play in that very fast, agile world that is, I don't see it slowing down. So, we have to play in that world. And the other thing I like to talk about is even from a discovery. So a lot of times, to me, discovery is the unfortunate part people skip, and it's usually
accelerate.
Yes, it's usually the foundation of your idea or your problem statement. Let's go back to the problem statements too. When you're trying to be rapid, you need really concise problem statements. But back to the discovery in the early stages of research, you can go lean there as well. So we've talked about a lot of those. If you've ever read some of Eric Reed's work and Cooper, there are a lot of ways that you can go out there and figure out quickly, discover if your product's even going to gain traction, or if you need to pivot, or hey, we're on to something but that can take just a day or two to go out there and do it. Or the worst that people hate is just to say, you know what, let's abandon, this isn't working. So they're really cheap and easy ways. So rapid research can be at any stage of a product. It just can become really critical when you start entering the actual development and agile world. But anyhow, just throwing.
I was connected to a team recently where, as we were talking about some of the insights coming out of some research that was rapid research of sorts, it wasn't quite as rapid as a week, a little bit more time than that. But one of the things that came out of the conversation was individuals in the room talking about how they created solutions that they thought worked for their customer and that worked for them in some ways. And so they assumed, well, if this is something that I would use, then this is the way I would use it. So more than likely my customers would use it this way as well. And the insights said the opposite, or told a story that was very different. And so that was a reminder to them that as a team, we need to have our assumptions, but instead of us running with those assumptions, let's just pause. Like just for a week or two, pause and go and either pull in an expert, engage some folks outside of the organization, but get some data around whether or not what we think is the right approach to how to design the product or the service, to make sure that it's actually the right way to go.
Right, exactly. And that's interesting. I flash back to a project I worked on. Actually, I worked on it for a while, but I do flash back that there were a lot of assumptions being made by the product management team, kind of and the executive leadership team about what are the key features. We already know what the key features we need to support are, and so let's go do that, and let's just hash out the details. But no one had ever gone out in the market to really determine what is that the most important thing. And we were able to use some lean testing, just throwing out marketing messages, but not, I think you and I have talked about this one before, but it was fascinating. It was one of my first truly lean experiments at the beginning of a project, but just putting something out there and making people, sign up, something to say they're serious, like, hey, sign up for this beta. And
like a behavioral experiment.
But just with a simple message out on a Google search, to see what was resonating with them. So some of those key features, without going into details of them, we quickly found out one of the key components, when you market that, you really didn't get any clicks, and we got no signups. When we marketed with a different component of that solution, it was like a 400% climb, went from 2-3 clicks to thousands of clicks. I mean, it was that extreme. But we found that out in a matter of 3 days by being able to push the traffic, on these searches and gauge where people were willing to, give up something, to show they were serious about being interested. So anyhow,
that's a really good example of how you use marketing, the messaging or positioning, where we typically think of that as something that comes after the product is created, but it's using it to guide or to influence the product, which is a lot more effective because you're leveraging tools to get answers more quickly in that regard.
Right.
That's a really interesting example. So what I heard from what you just said is you want to ask people about their perceptions of things. You want to see what actions people actually take, behavioral kind of actions in terms of signing up for something. Think about when you hear about a product or you read about it, and then you go and you enter your email address to say, keep me on your list when it's either available or when more information is forthcoming. And that's showing interest that helps you to say, from a discovery standpoint, that this is a viable path for us to go down as a team, where without that data, like you said, you might create something that gets 2 clicks, and you don't want to go down the development path prematurely
and miss the key problem that resonates with the user. So so those lean experiments can be really fun. I mean, they're very powerful. There are lots of little things you can do that are no cost, very few resources. Back to your AB example, you can even put beta type things in a product saying, hey, coming soon. If you've done anything like that, that also helps you identify things, but also prioritize things. How much are people going to use this? Are they even interested in it? We've got another feature we think they are interested in. Well, if no one's clicking on this beta sample, let's say you put something kind of fake going, hey, this is coming soon, and no one clicks on it, then maybe you need to prioritize something else on your list. So,
but as you talk about all of that, what I also think about is the importance of collaborative discussions inside the organization and across the team, because you've got to think about it from the business perspective, the engineering perspective, but also how do you, either from a marketing, a UX design, how do you create that concept or that beta concept to put out there? You've got to have that conversation together. And this is all the more reason to ensure that you have a 3-legged stool of business, engineering, and UX in your organization and during those conversations.
Yes. And I think rapid research lends itself well to creating that kind of
Cultivating that kind
team,
of,
yeah,
yeah,
collaboration, because you're all kind of working. Well, you are working toward the same goal at
right,
usually at that point when you're doing some of this rapid research. So it's going to
right.
take all those disciplines coming together, and they are all learning together. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not slowing things down anymore. We're
Mm-hmm.
collaborating, and we're pushing things out there and helping with those priorities and to deliver. So yeah, I'm a big, as you know, Kenya, I am a huge fan of like massive rapid
Mm-hmm.
research and lean
Absolutely.
methodologies, because I just think they lend themselves well to
So
develop.
let's take a pause here and see if there's anyone that's joined us that wants to share their name and where you're from, and if you have any questions for us. We are here to answer your questions. So put your information in the chat and we'll get to your questions as soon as we get them.
Yep.
So coming from an academic background, where do you think that shift in your career occurred to get you to think differently and to think in a more lean or rapid way in terms of the work that you do?
So, I mean, just for me personally,
Mhm.
agile. I was around when agile kind of really came to be, and it changed immediately how we need to work, or like I said, be left behind.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the big point, especially when it comes to truly lean methodologies, was being on a startup team on a
Mhm.
startup product. So we didn't have the luxury of having a whole lot of resources. We were a combined team, so
Mhm.
cross discipline team, a lean. We were set up to be a lean team. So
Mhm.
it kind of forced it, working with marketing, working with the product managers. We were on the same team. And then figuring out under these horrible deadlines,
Mhm.
cloud-based, innovative product, you end up under that kind of pressure. And so that's where I kind of learned,
Mhm.
I've got to keep up. We've got to move. There is no
Mhm.
slipping, whether I like it or not.
Mhm.
We have to do it. And so that's what I found very quickly. They weren't going to delay,
Right.
sprints and deliverables because I
Right.
didn't have research. So that's what,
Correct.
to
And
be honest, that's where it came in.
yes, and for me, it was being left out of the conversations
Exactly.
or becoming privy to the conversations where new product, new feature, new capability was being planned or sized for future sprints and never having any insight into these things. And part of it being, well, you or your team or anyone in that organization around UX research and design, you guys, we don't have time for you. We just need you to deliver against the expectations
Yeah.
in the context of a sprint. Size your efforts to create wireframes and concepts, but we don't have time for all that other stuff.
Yes.
So I think that also opened my eyes to the fact that having a seat at the table, a lot of us can get pragmatic around what we think our jobs are or should be in an organization. And, you've got to do all these things or take all these steps in order for it to be effective. Well, at some point, you have to be able to compromise
Yeah.
and negotiate around, okay, what will work. And a lot of that is an organization's culture.
Yeah.
Um, and then some of it, again, is the agility that exists. And so when you balance those two things, you want to make sure that you have a seat at the table and that if that agility or an agile sort of engineering effort exists, that you know how you can fit in that process effectively.
Exactly. You are part of that team.
Mhm.
Yes. Because I think, I can't tell you the number of clients or number of projects I've been on where the UX does get left behind because
Oh,
they're not
yeah.
fitting in with that team and that agile work environment. So yeah, definitely.
Oh,
But
or you become someone who's resistant to doing it differently, and that every circumstance or situation does not require a screwdriver. That whole, that
right,
saying,
yes,
everything is not solved in the same way. And so that means you have to look at this particular scenario differently.
yes, yeah, and you're and forming that relationship with that
Mm-hmm.
product management team is
Mm-hmm.
definitely critical.
Mm-hmm.
You want them to be your champion, being integrated into those development teams, but also that's who you have to sell yourself to a lot of times, because that's who's
Absolutely.
going to take those findings. Oftentimes, they're owning the roadmaps. So I think that's another recommendation I have for people is just
Absolutely.
making sure you have those relationships. And then when you fit in that process and demonstrate, hey, look, we can be agile and deliver with you. Just give us a
Mm-hmm.
seat at the table, like you said.
Right.
So getting in there and doing that. That's
And
the tough
having,
part, though.
yes, and having a strategy roadmap, a
Yes.
research roadmap, that
Yes.
those two are working together. And that's where you can address that bigger, heavier, more research intensive activity. But then you, alongside your development team within the agile sprints, you now have another method of getting some of those quick and dirty answers
Right.
to help make adjustments or to say we're going in the right direction. And that also means when you're having conversations, ongoing conversations with the team, especially planning and retrospective conversations, sprint demos, you have a more data driven conversation,
Hmm.
and or you can start to talk about the data we need to capture moving forward. So it allows you
Right.
as the researcher on the team to contribute in a way that's more than just delivering, here's the report or here are the things we need to do in the application. It allows you to become a more integral part of that agile team.
It's that whole iterative, agile
Mhm.
is all about iterations,
Mhm.
improvement. So yes, you need to be part of that that story, and being able to iterate that quickly
Mhm.
and being able to pivot that quickly based on the data. And I love you mentioning the roadmaps, because that's one thing I think, um, where I've seen the teams work best together from a product management
Mhm.
UX perspective is product management has their strategic roadmap, and tactical roadmap, and
Mhm.
UX having a
Their
roadmap
strategic
as
and their
well
tactical.
works,
Mhm.
because if we can see and what their roadmap is, it's like, okay, this
Mhm.
is strategic enough. We can get out and get that rich data up front for these pieces. When we come right here, we got to be ready to do that rapid iterative research. And of course, do it where you can, even on the strategic pieces.
Exactly.
But that's really, I'm glad you mentioned that, because
Yeah.
I think those roadmaps can be very important,
Yeah.
in matching those up and figuring out where can you do what kind of research and what kind of resources are you going to need, and then how that might drive
Mhm.
future work in
Development
there.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on the side of, so we've talked a lot about being in that research role or in the driver's seat of owning that research. But if you think about the other roles that are a part of the team, it's your responsibility as a product owner, product manager, or engineer on the team to think about where you have questions of, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if this is the right approach. I'm not completely confident about, blankety blank. And so you have to be able to recognize that those opportunities exist to go and validate. And there has to be a space or a forum for you to have that conversation.
Right. Yeah.
So that means that operationally, I am one of those folks that believe that in order to be effective as an organization that really aligns to your customers' needs and expectations, you've got to focus on your operations inside your
Hmm.
organization, and they have to be conducive to or support the needs of operationally of
Yeah.
engaging your customer at the right time and in the right way and that sort of thing. So this is not just about the responsibility that we're saying you put on your researcher or research team. This is also about the stakeholders in the organization recognizing when there are questions that require answers or clarity, that requires you to either talk to customers or proxies within your organization.
Yes. Yes. Going back to that lean piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah, use the
Absolutely.
people internally as well. There's great data. There's rarely not great data internally that can be leveraged in some way. Again, just going back to the whole rapid research type of concept. So I'm not sure what about you, Kenya, just experiences and looking at the different methodologies that can be leveraged for more of the lean, rapid versus
Versus
traditional.
longer term. So I think that it comes back to having the right set of questions. So my experiences have been you got to have the right set of questions either locked and loaded. So I've got a set of questions that are kind of standard who, what, where, when, how, and
Mhm,
why
mhm.
questions. They're not directly like who is this? What is that? It's more of the things that get at that information, but they're ready or they're framed in a way where they're ready to be adjusted and modified. And so having those available and then knowing, okay, when I interact with my customer or my client rather, and they're in a product management or strategy role, when they say, well, these are a few things that we're unclear about, I've had the opportunity to pull those questions off the shelf, adjust them very quickly and say, okay, what are the really critical things that we need to know? How do we take that template, modify it, or modify those questions and give us access to a couple of people that are in your organization, give us access to a couple of customers,
Right.
and then put those questions in front of them and share the concepts that you have as well, so that in that conversation we can get at the framing around, this is an approach that the team's thinking about. What are your thoughts, or who would you do this with, or how would you utilize this type of solution? Those are the kind of questions that we've been able to ask and get answers to, that can then funnel back into the UX design team, the engineering team, and it now gives them data rather than them just saying, I think this is the right approach.
Or-
And I had this conversation with someone earlier today. The key to understanding when it's time to go do some quick and dirty research is when you're having a conversation. That's why it's so important to have that cross-functional conversation, ongoing conversation,
Yep.
is that when you find yourself starting questions out with, I think, whoever says, I think, that's one to jot down and say, okay, we need to go get some
To
data on.
validate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about those challenges? So I know that's part of what we're talking about here is that people get in their head, they have to do these big projects. Even
Mhm.
clients, when they want to engage with us in consulting, it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, maybe not. This is a long stick. It's going to take,
Mhm.
a year. And that's where I think we're really good about coming in saying, you don't have to,
You
yet you
don't need
can
all of that.
start here. But when you think about people embedded on the team, that can be a challenge. And I know I was mentioning your product management can be your best friend, being
Mhm.
your champion, but it is hard to overcome when there is some kind of discovery work going on. And there's one of you, let's say. I know there's some companies that have 20
Mhm.
UXers on the team, but for the ones who, you are kind of on your own,
On your own.
the
Mhm.
challenges of keeping up with those in sprint type, staying a turn
Yeah.
or two ahead, but also doing that more robust
Yeah. Yeah.
planning work for the future.
I've seen where if you're like a UX research team of one kind of thing, pull in your product partner and go do that work together. Give them some direction around where they can do some of the heavy lifting and partner on it. But again, 25% on that planning, 50% on the execution, 25% on the analysis and readout.
Analysis.
And the readout are actionable things and stuff that people can just take and run with. And if you use your partners, don't always feel like you have to go at it alone. Utilize your partners or your partnerships to be able to get that sort of information.
Yes, definitely. I think back to BAs, business analysts I worked
Yeah,
with,
BAs
and
as
a
well.
lot of times we would tag team on, trying to get out and get some quick answers for some key features and things of that nature. So, yep.
Mhm. Have you
So,
ever seen rapid research go wrong?
um, well, yeah, I think I've seen everything go wrong. I have, but when I've seen it go wrong, it's usually because you were so limited in
Mhm.
your scope or audience of participants for a
Mhm.
complicated project that
Mhm.
involves industries and discipline, that sort of thing. But I've also seen it. Um, I've also seen it go wrong in terms of not having the correct. So when you go back to what I was talking about with that search and whether people would sign up for a beta, that's kind of their version of showing I'm serious, I'm committed.
I'm
It's
giving you
my
my
form of payment. Yeah.
information. Mhm.
And I've seen people not have strong enough measurements for how committed a person is, when
Mm.
they're doing that really early stuff.
So the
You know,
currency is
the
not
currency
the
is
currency
not
is not.
strong enough to
Mhm.
be, yeah, because a lot of people say yes. Um,
Yeah.
but and that varies. So currency can be hard to gauge,
Yeah.
and it depends on the project. Some currency might need to be, hey, look, you just put a little down here, and we'll
Mhm.
be back with you, but we're going to give you a big discount. That
Mhm.
that's
Or
a
it might be
strong
put your money
currency.
where your mouth is kind of thing and show that you're committed to this product.
It show you're committed. So I've seen it go wrong there, where you thought the currency would represent
Mhm.
true
And it
currency
doesn't.
when you have a product, and it didn't, or you really didn't have anything there.
Mhm.
It was just, we're just measuring clicks, still important, but I have seen it kind of go wrong there, that it doesn't end up meeting the stakeholders' expectations based on that early data, because of
Mhm.
the currency or the wrong audience. But
And I've seen things go wrong. You just reminded me of in situations where you're presenting or trying to get an answer to something that is at the micro level within a bigger product or experience. And if it's a complex product, just getting that feedback on that micro doesn't necessarily convey how it fits into the macro.
yeah,
And where the decisions and actions that are taken at the micro level, what impact or influence they have on the macro, and just don't have enough time to do that sort of thing in a rapid fashion. And it requires more context. It requires more around helping or showing the user where it fits within the bigger picture and that kind of thing. And where you don't have time to do that, I've seen things go wrong, because what comes out of the rapid research, it gives you an answer around something small, but then it doesn't give you an answer around, something
how it
big.
fits
I,
in.
I buy a house that I love, but I did not do enough research on the neighborhood and how I was going to navigate to work every day and the traffic patterns. And so that was kind of my micro decision to buy this house, because I fell in love with it. But at a macro level, where it's positioned, it's
Yes.
conducive to
Yeah.
my ability to get to work on time.
That is a good one, and I know you've had recent experience with that as well, where it was like, yes. So if I show you a house, Kenya, and I'm like, boom, here's the house, here's
Mhm.
a video, the interior, it's just
I love it.
unbelievable. You're
Mhm.
probably going to report to me, yes, I love that house. When I
Mhm.
come back to you for your currency, so if your currency is just giving a yes, I like
I
that.
love it. Mhm.
When I come back to you and say, okay, I've got the house. I built the house. Can you come
Mhm.
buy it? You you might drive there and go, hey, that's 45 minutes from work,
Correct.
and I don't know. It's right next to
Right next to
a
the highway,
landfill.
or yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly,
So I'm not gonna buy it. So same
exactly.
thing with products. Like if you take one feature or one component of that product, it sounds
Mhm.
great
In
in
isolation.
isolation, but
Mhm.
not when it's actually put in the context of that workflow or that whatever it may be,
Correct.
that ecosystem. So
Correct. And that's
that's
where you give me a tool that is effective in addressing a pain point, but that tool does not fit in my workflow,
yes,
then that rapid research, the data that you provided or that you captured in that rapid research, yeah, sure, it gives you data points, but
yes,
you have to take them with a grain of salt because there's a bigger picture to consider. So,
absolutely,
and sometimes that might be okay, but it may not be okay in some instances as well.
absolutely. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah, yeah. So, when you think about rapid research, what are the things that are the gotchas outside of kind of that micro macro perspective? What are some other gotchas that you can think of that we haven't talked about?
Um, I'm trying to think. You've caught me. You always are
Yeah.
throwing
Did I
questions
catch
at me.
you?
I
Or did
mean,
we cover all of them in
I'm
terms of
trying to think of any gotchas we haven't talked about. One gotcha, definitely, we were talking about your target audience. You can
Mhm,
leverage internal, but if it's complicated enough or has specialized role or
mhm,
whatever it may be, you could lean too heavily on someone that doesn't you don't have a representation of all the things
mhm,
that might be out there. I think that's a big one. And you're always going to be faced with what you were saying, that you're trying to do it kind of lean,
mhm,
rapid, and in some cases, you're not going to get that full picture. I think you
mhm.
gave a great example. It alone, something's great. But if you're not digging into
A
it
bigger
in the
context.
context of the
Yeah,
real
yeah.
ecosystem, it may be a different thing.
I
But that's
know, I
also
know,
what
I know about you.
research is.
I can think of if you just don't have the if it's just not something that's suited for rapid research. You've got to make a decision to say, we
Yes.
have to forego and figure out a contingency plan in case whatever design decision or approach you go with is not the right one. You just can't do it. Everything can't fit into a rapid research scenario. And I think
No,
that's
no,
something.
not a complete no. No, that is very, very true, even though sometimes you're gonna be forced into,
Making
trying to
sense
do
of
it
something.
sometimes. But
Mhm,
yeah. But I think that's where you have to when you use rapid research, where are
mhm,
you in the discovery process? You don't
mhm.
know a thing about your users, then you're probably not gonna figure it out in 2 days, if you're
Right.
yeah,
You
so
have bigger work to do, but that also so there's leaning on your expertise as
yeah,
someone who can stand in as a proxy for the user in terms of your perspectives, but then
yes,
also identifying that, oh, we have to go back and do discovery work. Now we've got to go back to our research roadmap and look at where do we fit that work in, and that rapid research because becomes something
yeah,
downstream.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that that's probably something to consider in efforts is, how do we make sure that we're not doing rapid research for the sake of saying we can do it, but it's not the right area to focus on because it is so small.
Right.
So, hey, Ryan. So, Ryan's question is, what are 1 to 2 areas, departments, or journey that rapid research might provide powerful insights where companies aren't looking into it at all? Meaning, it's not somewhere they have ever considered rapid research or customer research in general. That's a good one.
That is a good
I
one.
can I can say that as my time outside of organizations as a partner with organizations has evolved, what I have seen is there is more opportunity to dig into your operational aspects and how you do things within marketing, within sales, within different departments within your organization, within your customer service organization. So using
Training.
training, using
Mhm.
your expertise around evaluating their operational mechanics and then the products that they're using, but also looking at things from the perspective of the consumer on the other end, and do those two align?
Yeah, that's a good one, and that is a great question, because I think there are
Yes.
a lot of areas that are ignored when I think of training, support,
Yes.
services. They have their own tools and their own methods, and to your point, the way they operate, and there's a lot of opportunity. And I actually had a recent client where we did that, actually took
Mm-hmm.
their services department and experimented with a couple of um, ways they message to users, and
Mm-hmm.
ways they train to kind of get a idea of what was working best based on some feedback they've been given. So
Yes, and I've had a project where customer service, they had up to 17, 18 different applications they were using to
mhm,
service one customer of theirs. And so they recognized that too many tools, there's not a single sign-on approach that's being employed. And the issues made it to where it took more time to service their
yeah,
customer, but it also led to inaccuracies in the information that was being shared or presented. And so that assessment had to be done internally to decide, what is our single source going to be? Do we build it or buy it?
right.
And what is this doing to their end user or end customer's experience? So that's a really great question. Thank you for that. And we are 1 minute past time. Um, one more question from Ryan. What are 2 to 3 questions I could take to a stakeholder or a C-level person that would show them that we're in the dark and might need to do some rapid customer research? That's also a good one. Deanne, you have a how do I get them to realize, oh crap, we don't know that? You have
Uh, we could almost have a session. I mean, a
That's a
live
good one for
stream
next
on
week.
how do you get your champion on the executive front to support your what you want to do. So I don't know,
Mhm.
Kenya, where I know we're
Yeah,
over.
let's hold that one for next week. I love that question, and we'll cue that up for next week's topic. But I will say that the high level kind of answer to this question lies in understanding or having data around your end customers' experience, and recognizing what things inside of your organization, what levers do you have to pull that can improve that outside customer's experience. So we can talk more about what are those specific questions next time. But thank you again, Ryan, and anyone else that joined us today. And we will see you next week, Tuesday at noon.
Bye.
Bye.